Okay, hopefully that's the majority of people joined the session now. So welcome to this Vevox webinar, which is about the future in student engagement. And it's a panel session this afternoon. So I'm Carol Summerside from Newcastle University, and I'm going to chair the panel today. And I work in our Learning and Teaching Development Service as a Learning Enhancement and Technology Advisor. So we work with academic colleagues in using all of the education technology that we have here at Newcastle. We've had Vevox for about 18 months now, so not very long. Certainly not as long as some of the people on the panel and potentially some of you in the room as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing what other people have been doing and hopefully learning something myself. So we have 3 colleagues from other universities on the session today. So we've got Susanna Kushina, who's a technician at the Centre for Teaching and Learning at the University of Aveiro. She's been involved in the management and support of the university's e-learning platform since 2004. And since 2024, she's been managing and supporting their use of Vevox. So welcome, Susanna. Then we've got Laura Jenkins, who teaches in psychology at Loughborough University. And she has experience of different learning technologies in her teaching and aims to use these to increase class engagement and uses tools such as Vevox to provide formative feedback. And then we've got Christina Stanley, who is a behavioural ecologist at University of Chester. Sorry, just had to check your logo there, Christina. And she's also a University Innovation Fellow, and she's passionate about inclusive teaching, in particular supporting students with mental health challenges. And then we do also have, although you can't see him, Ethan Butland, who's one of Vevox's senior customer success managers. So Ethan will be in the background managing the chat and things if anything goes in there, although we are going to ask you to use Vevox for questions. And also if anything technical comes up, then Ethan will be able to answer that as well. So firstly, and there we all are, on the slide, and hopefully you can see all of us as well. But to start us off, let's open a poll. So what are you hoping to get out of the session today? So we've got 3 different people. We've got 2 lecturers and 2 of us who are kind of more on the learning technologist side of it. So hopefully we have lots of experience to share with you. So share practice, knowledge, engagement, get some inspiration. I'm sure we can do that. So thank you for that. And you'll notice that we're using the display results as they come in so that we can see what's happening. And if anybody isn't aware already, you can click on responses and make them bigger to be able to flag particular things to the class. So we'll just stop that one. And then the other thing we're interested in is who we have in the room today. So 34 of you logged on now, but what sort of role have you got? Are you a lecturer? Are you a learning technologist? Something else? So we've got university teacher. And for this one, we're using a word cloud so we can see the answers as they come in as well. And for anybody new to Vevox, you'll see in the top corner up here, I can see how many people are attached to the session and how many people are responding, which is really useful. So corporate training, so that's a bit different. Librarians, yeah, we've got a lot of our library team here make use of technology as well. That's great. I'll stop that now because I think we've got a nice feel for who's here today. So I'll just close that poll and hop back to the Q&A. So I see a few of you have already put some questions in. I see there's a bit of a time delay or a lag on the video. I'll try and move through things a bit slower just to be sure that everybody gets to see all of the slides, although obviously the focus is going to be people talking anyway. We'll come to all the questions at the end. So if you could submit your questions as the panel members are talking, and then we'll look at them all at the end. If there's lots, then the way we'll deal with them is by answering the ones that have had the most thumbs up. So if you see one that you want to know about as well, rather than asking it again, just give it a thumbs up and then we'll know that there's multiple people interested in that question. And if your question is for a particular member of the panel, if you could pop their name in the question, and then we'll know who the question is for. If it's just a general question, then we'll give everybody an opportunity to answer it. Okay, so now we know who we've got here and what they're interested in. Let's move on to speaking to our actual panel. So the first question that we're going to look at today is, how are you using education technology to engage students, and what are you finding are the benefits? And Susanna, if we could come to you first for that one, please.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for being here and for your invitation. Here at the university, we use several technologies to enhance education. And since 2024, we started with the Vevox to have more engaging and more dynamic lessons. Teachers are telling me that they use it to have a break in the classroom and to get some attention from the students. They are some of the teachers use Vevox for evaluation, where you can use it with questions identified, and others, they use it only to check if the students are really paying attention to the classes and to get them more participative use of the technology in the lessons. I think when we started, we have a small group of teachers using it, and then they felt that the participation in the classroom was increasing, and so by mouth to mouth, they were talking with each other and saying, please use this in your classroom, because it gets really the attention of your students. So I think as a part of a benefits on using not only Vevox but other technologies, it's the increasing of the participation. It's the accessibility that they have when they use technologies, because everybody has a mobile phone, or a computer. So when you have these positives in your hand, you can easily get in touch with the technologies and access them and participate in the classrooms. And also the immediate feedback that you have when you use this kind of technologies, it's benefic. Sorry, I don't know the word. It helps students to know if they are doing okay, if they are doing well in the classroom, and also helps the teacher knowing if they are being effective, if the message is passing to their students. So I don't know if you want to give me some more details.
No, that's perfect. That's a great start. I'm particularly interested in using it for evaluation and feedback. So when we get to the end, I might ask you some questions about that bit. Christina, could we move on to you next, please?
Yeah, sure. So I've been using Vevox quite a long time. We've been using it at the University of Chester for a number of years, since it became Vevox, really. I think it was called another name before that, and we were using it then as well. So we've used it for quite a long time, and we found it really, really useful in a broad range of scenarios. But me personally, the way that I use Vevox is to overcome barriers to engagement. So those barriers could be things like a lack of confidence. A lot of students just don't have the confidence to ask questions in class in person. But for me, it's also about overcoming barriers in terms of mental health and neurodivergence. So we know that nowadays we have a lot more students declaring as having mental health needs and neurodivergent diagnoses. And I found that Vevox has been really, really useful for these students in particular to sort of level the playing fields and ensure that they all have an equal opportunity to engage in the sessions. It's really nice because it provides anonymity, obviously. So it means that all students can ask questions, can answer questions without others knowing who they are, without knowing their identity. And it just really helps everyone in the room to have a say and to get involved in the sessions. So I have found that it's really boost engagement in the sessions. I get really positive feedback from the students at the end of year module evaluations. They always comment on having lots of Vevox in their sessions. But I've also had students come to me personally and say, I'm really nervous, or I have social anxiety, or I have autism, and this has really helped me to be engaged, and I can't engage in any other way. So for me, that's how I found it really useful.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Christina. And we've actually got a session coming up about using technology with different types of students and with different student requirements. So I'm definitely made a note of that we can flag up Vevox as being particularly useful. Laura, if you'd like to answer the same question, please.
Yes, proud. Similar to Christina, I've been using Vevox sort of since well before it was called Vevox. I think it was called Me Too or something along those lines. So since about 2018, 2019, when I started at Loughborough. And it's gone from sort of being a piece of technology that a few staff will use to now something that we do use university-wide. So our sort of learning technology departments will use Vevox, the to-go tool, if staff are struggling with student engagement. In psychology, we have sort of over 400 students in a lecture at one time, and it doesn't take very much for students to get distracted. So what we tend to do is every sort of 20 minutes or so, we'll give students a Vevox activity, whether that's a piece cloud, a multiple choice question, or more recently I've started using the pin-on activities where you give the students an image, they'll pin on those activities, and it's quite scary when you get a couple of hundred students pinpointing on a certain image, but it sort of does help the students refocus as well. I think one of the things that hasn't been mentioned a lot is the Q&A function. So at the minute, myself and one of my colleagues tend to sort of teach at the front of the lecture, and we will have the Vevox Q&A a piece on a laptop or on one of our phones as well. A piece to answer student questions in real time as we're going along. It takes some sort of a piece to have the ability to do quite a few different things at one time, sort of paying attention to students and using Vevox. But the students do appreciate it, and we have had really positive feedback about, the response times to those questions, and the fact that Vevox in general makes the lectures a little bit more engaged and a lot more interesting, and it's fully anonymous, as Christina said beforehand, so a piece to consider students who might not be as comfortable in, putting hands up or, speaking in front of others as well. So yes, I think everything else has pretty much been said as well. A piece.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, so we've talked about lots of positives, which is great, and we know there's lots of positives in using the system, but like everything, nothing's perfect, and there are issues and challenges. So the next question is, what issues or challenges do you or others within your institution face with educational technology? And if you've got any advice for how to overcome them, that would be great. Or if you would like advice from anybody else in the room, I'm sure we could ask people to pop in the Q&A if they've got any ways of overcoming things. So Christina, could we start with you this time, please?
Yeah, sure. I was thinking about this question. I think one of the big challenges is people's lack of confidence in using these educational technologies. So some systems that people use can be quite complicated, quite technical. And I think until you've used it quite a bit, you're always a bit worried about what could go wrong, or it just not working at the time, or just sort of really failing on you. And I must say that Vevox has always worked with me. I've always been very happy with it. But I know that that's something that people do worry about. And for good or for bad, during the pandemic, we were forced to use platforms such as Vevox all the time. So I think that sort of sudden throwing you into it really made everybody get used to using these things. But I think when you have a bit of confidence using them, it becomes much easier. With other educational technologies, one of the things that I worry about is not having the right equipment at the time. So, for example, if it has to have a big screen and you turn up in the teaching room and there isn't the right screen there for you. So I think one of the good things about Vevox is it is so accessible to everybody. Everybody has a smartphone. whether or not they use it. They all have one with them. So it's something that everyone can use, and hopefully it will always be there and work for you. Another challenge that I have heard from neurodivergent students is that they like having consistency in terms of platforms they're using. So what they don't seem to like is people using lots and lots of different types of platforms and them having to adapt to loads of different technologies. So I think my advice would be try and pick one sort of consistent platform to use where at all possible, because it really helps students, because they just don't like having to learn to use a new platform every time, and it can be a bit confusing. So consistency with education technology, like with many things, can be really good.
Thanks, Christina. They're all really useful points. If we could move on to Laura next for this question, please.
Yeah, that's fab. So we use Vevox in quite a lot of our teaching, so in large lectures, smaller classrooms as well. And I think one of the challenges that we do have is that at the start of a lecture, you'll have maybe 50, 60, 70% of the students logging in. Towards the end of the lecture, that sort of ends up as maybe 20 or 30%. So at the minute, we're trying to encourage participation across the lecture, because we do sort of try and explain to students that the questions at the end are just as important as everything that's going on at the start. And what I tend to do is in my teaching is some of the Vevox activities will be related to the content of the lecture, but some of them might be a little bit more lighthearted. There's things that I've taught eyewitness testimony before, and I have sort of asked students if they've ever, been not so much a real world eyewitness, but sort of a more sort of a fake eyewitness in different studies and that sort of thing, which is relevant for us educators. We can get to see sort of how much information students have. But it's not sort of, it's allowing students to then refocus after that on the lecture content as well. One of the main challenges we've had is that because students after sort of 20 or 30 minutes can lack focus a little bit, and there's research out there to back that up as well, is that you often find that the responses to those activities do become a little bit more silly. So we do have to set expectations at the start of the lecture just to say, look, although it is anonymous, we do expect, no inappropriate language, things like that. We still expect engagement with those as well. And I think that's why it's good to give students the opportunity to be a little bit more silly and to not be as, heavy going in terms of responding to certain questions. I think the final challenge, which Christine has mentioned, is not to use too much in one go. So at Loughborough, we tend to use a combination of Vevox within the lectures, and then we've got another piece of technology called H5P, which links up to our virtual learning environment, and we will give students activities in relation to those outside of the lectures, or if we've got sort of smaller workshops as well, which then means that we use Vevox interchangeably with other things as well. And we sort of developed the term Vevox fatigue, because if too many staff members use Vevox in one go, we often do find that students do get a little bit fed up with it. And so we have to be mindful of that as staff. If a student's got 4 or 6 hours of lecture each day, and then they're using Vevox in each one of those, they are going to get a little bit, a little bit tired of using Vevox. So we just have to be mindful of that when planning our teaching as well. Have students had 6 hours of psychology lectures in one day? Could it potentially be that we, have discussion activities alongside Vevox, which help as well? And I think we'll sort of address these issues as we're going on when we're teaching, and that then just helps us sort of use Vevox appropriately, I would say, rather than just having a topic or a question here, there and everywhere. It's a case of using it constructively, I think, in the teaching as well.
Yeah, definitely not just using it for the sake of using something. So going back to Christina's point about, obviously, particularly students who are neurodivergent appreciate the same thing being used. But I assume you meant, Christina, like they wouldn't want multiple different types of audience interaction system. They want to know that there's one being used. But I assume you use other things as well in the same way as Laura does. Just, yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there anything in particular, or
So I personally use Padlet quite a lot, because I think that very different. Yeah, it's for different purposes. I think as long as I think the main thing is to use the same platform for the consistent purpose, I suppose. So it's not good to have more than one, but it's nice for students to have consistent, maybe 2 or 3 that you use throughout everything.
Yeah. Excellent. And then Susanna, obviously you're coming at it from a slightly different standpoint because you're in a similar role to me, but issues and challenges that your university have faced?
I agree with Laura and Christina about the digital fatigue. Sometimes in our Center for Teaching and Learning, we hear some students saying that some teachers do use Vevox or do use other technologies with very much in the classroom. So sometimes they don't know the purpose of using it, and so they get, why am I doing this? And that's a challenge. The use of the technology should have a purpose and should not be exaggerated. Or else the students get tired and they are bothered, and the benefits that we've talked about before, we are not getting them. So I think it's really a challenge to have classes, presential classes with some technologies, not over exaggerating the use of it, and have other things that can involve the student, not only technologies but something practical, like having some group doing other kinds of goals and doing other tasks, and not only with technology. They have to sometimes to stop with technology. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes that can be a novelty in itself now, can't it? Something that's not technology and a bit old school. That's really useful. I'm sure there's questions coming in as well, but we'll come to those at the end. Because the final question, which I'm going to come to Laura first with, because I know Laura's been undertaking some research that is particularly relevant to this question. So what are your plans going forward for using education technology? And for all 3 of you, that could be you personally or your university. So things that are up and coming or plans that you've got. So yeah, if we'll go to Laura first, please.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Carol. So at Loughborough, different schools will sort of do different areas of research in terms of Vevox. But in general, we have our sort of technology team who've developed online guides in relation to appropriate situations of where Vevox can be used. So at the minute, it's being used a lot for mid-module feedback. In the middle of the semester, what we tend to do is give our students 2 or 3 very basic questions, like asking about improvements and, what's gone well with the modules, and then sort of a 5-star rating sort of thing. But then it's more of an informal way of gathering feedback from students and used widely within the university. So the school that I am in, we sort of, psychologists are in that school as well, but we also have biosciences and the sports programs as well. And a lot of the lecturers within the school tend to use Vevox for that purposes. What we're doing in psychology at the minute is we are conducting some research in terms of can influence a student's engagement with Vevox. For myself, one of my colleagues, Dr. David Mid-Menthouse, we've recently had a paper published in Psychology Teaching Review, which looks at our own reflections upon using Vevox within our lectures. So David teaches the first year module. I then teach the sort of subsequent second year module. So we use our module evaluations in those cases, publish data, looking at our reflections and how students, how they have ideas about what Vevox should look like in terms of a lecture. And on top of that, that's then sort of allowed me to go away and look in more detail about the factors that could influence students' use of Vevox. So I've just collected data from the large-scale module that I teach with an area of cognitive psychology, and I asked students to sort of use that mid-module feedback, but I then sort of tagged on some extra questionnaires as well, which looked at things such as, personality, being a mental health with our student cohorts as well. And we're looking to publish that as well to see what factors might influence mainly student perceptions of Vevox as well. So we do have sort of some initial results at the minute, which are looking sort of quite good. So things like student motivation heavily influences whether students are not feeling positively towards Vevox or whether they feel more negatively towards it. But at the minute, we're just in that data analysis stage, and we're just sort of starting to write up the paper at the minute to do with that. So hopefully in the next couple of months, that paper submitted to another academic journal out there as well. But at the minute, it's more about looking at can sort of stop a student from using Vevox, or those things such as, mental health difficulties, where and how we use Vevox well. And those the sort of things that are going to stop a student engaging with Vevox. So that's sort of our plans for the future. Once we've looked at the that we've got, we'll then sort of progress with the other aspects that come out of those as well. And we'll look more in detail about those factors that might influence engagement with the tool and what they feel about the tool as well.
And the modular evaluation thing is certainly something we've thought about using it for here. So that's really interesting to hear. That's what you've been doing. Can I just ask a quick question? Are you doing that as a live in the session and they're answering it? Or are you using the surveys functionality in Vevox?
But no, you can do it either way, but we tend to use it a bit of both. So I've done it both ways. I've done it as sort of a question outside of the session where students can respond in a session, but then they can't see the live responses.
Yeah.
But I've also done it live as well, and where students can see the live responses. And I think the live version for me is better because then students can see how transparent we're being, and that we're not sort of hiding any responses. We're not sort of saying to students, oh yes, it was, but the module feedback if we didn't. We're sort of being transparent, and we can then respond to student concerns there and then, rather than, having 2 or 3 weeks where a student might not get a response to a concern. We can then sort of talk to students and be honest straight away. If things are going wrong or not going quite right, we can then sort of address that there and then. So I would say for me, live probably the best way for me, but I do it both ways. I think for me, it just depends on the cohort and how many students are in the room at the same time.
Yeah, but I imagine you get a really good response rate, because if you're doing it there and then
if we do it live, we'll get a higher response rate if we do it live. If we do it outside the session, we'll then have to prompt students a little bit more.
Yeah.
But we'll still get good response rates anyway in terms of module feedback. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. I'm sure you've got lots more to say, but we'll move on to the others to make sure we've got plenty of time for questions. So if we come to you now, Susanna.
So we think the use of Vevox it's really important, but nowadays we are facing, as you also must be, with the increased use of AI in classes, in students' work, in students' responses, and so we tend to try to have here some technologies that can aggregate the AI or in Vevox or in our LMS that can help not only students but help also the teachers to be more engaged and to be more participative in the classrooms. We have some struggles with the AI, and I think in your universities maybe you have it also, because we need some guide, some orientation that help the use of it. How can we use it on the classroom? How if it is allowed or if it is not allowed? Are the students well prepared to use it? Are they only copying the responses or not? So some struggles with that we have it, and so we are planning to do something on this on this on the use of AI with technologies and with the Vevox and our elements. So we are going in that path.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely don't think you're going there. I think we could probably all say yes. It's exciting, but it needs, input and support, and to make sure that everybody, staff and students, are using it in the most appropriate way. So I certainly echo that. So Christina, finally for you, plans going forward for education technology, and that can be Vevox or other things as well.
Yeah, for me, it's more about just thinking about a diversity of situations where educational technology can be useful. So, for example, I use it during public engagement events. It's a really good way of getting the public really excited about your research and feeling like you're having a conversation with the general public about your research and they're getting to feedback on it. It's also really useful for other situations, not just sort of education, but, for example, planning field trips. So whenever I'm planning field trips with students, I'll use Vevox, the Q&A board, so they can ask questions anonymously, because there are lots of questions that students have about field trips that they don't want to ask in front of others. And it can be all kinds of things like, will there be toilets wherever we go? Things that they really don't want to put their hand up and ask, but it's really important they ask these questions so that they feel confident to go on the field trips. So I find Vevox so useful in all these different situations and other educational technology. But in terms of my plans going forwards, I did a research project a while ago, which we're just waiting for it to be published at the moment. It's in review at the moment. And that was using a questionnaire and also using Vevox as a way of quantifying student engagement to look at whether students use Vevox for particular reasons in sessions. And in particular, looking at students with neurodivergent or mental health diagnoses. And it's really interesting because within the cohort we looked at, 28% of the students had neurodivergent or mental health diagnoses. So I think that just shows how many students we're thinking about engaging here. And they were significantly more they showed significantly lower confidence to participate in in-person sessions. So I think that really does show that there is evidence that this is needed. We have so many students who really have these barriers to them engaging at the moment. And so if we can use educational technology in lots of different ways to make sure that those barriers are broken down, that's what I really want to work towards. So that's what I'm looking into, how we can use technology to make sure that everyone can access the learning in the same way.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. I love that idea of using it for questions for field trips. We have a lot of subject areas that do that sort of thing, and placements and stuff. That's a great idea. Okay, so they were the 3 questions that we had. So hopefully those answers have all been of interest, but let's have a look and see what questions have been coming up here. So we've got it sorted by most liked. So we'll go for just down in order. So we've got at the top, do you link Vevox to your VLE? So certainly here at Newcastle, we have Canvas, and we do have the Canvas add-in. It's not been widely used yet, but it's sort of something we want to promote. But what about the rest of you? Laura, I'll start with you just because you're at the top of my screen.
That is fine. We can link it to our VLE. So we use a Moodle-based online tool, which we call it Learn. And we can do, but at the minute, it's not one of those things that's widely used. I think just because it does take a little bit of time to get set up. But it's listed on my to-do list for this summer to have a look to see how I can then embed Vevox into the VLE. Vevox, because I'm at the point now where I've used Vevox quite a lot in the lectures. I'm very comfortable with Vevox, not leading a lot of preparation. So it's one of those things that I am going to look into over the course of this summer. So watch this space. It might end up being that come September, October time, it's embedded in those VLEs at Loughborough.
Excellent. Christina, not sure which VLE you use.
Yes, at the University of Chester, we use Moodle. And no, it isn't embedded at the moment. I'm not sure whether we will or not. It's not something I've ever thought of doing, to be honest, because I only really use it in live sessions, but I can see how it could be useful.
Cool. And Susanna?
Yes, our VLE, it's Moodle also, and we use it embedded with Vevox. in the first question, I've told you about the evaluation and having some questions where that are not anonymous. And so when Vevox is integrated into Moodle, teachers get the evaluation of the questions, and then the evaluation goes to the gradebook. And so it's easy for the teacher to then assess if the students are doing the evaluation. So it's like a small evaluation, like just a question or two in the classroom that goes to Moodle, and then it goes to the gradebook.
Okay, so that allows the efficiency. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So answered that one. Okay, interesting one at the top that's got lots of likes. Have you seen students' results get better or retention of knowledge improve as well through the use of Vevox or any other education technology? Anybody want to go first or comment on whether they've seen any of that?
So at Loughborough, I used to teach on a foundations program as well. And when I first started at Loughborough, I didn't really use Vevox or anything that would try and engage students. But then sort of a few years after starting, I started using Vevox, and I noticed that students were getting more involved answering the questions in the lectures, and the exam marks did seem to improve a little bit now, because we didn't have any data that we could analyse or anything like that, and we didn't have ethical approval to sort of publish anything. That was just sort of my observation as an educator. So when I first started, we didn't use a lot of sort of interactive tools or anything like that. But as soon as Vevox was implemented, it did help the students, consolidate what they'd learned and to then sort of have that ability to ask questions when needed. And I think that wasn't about us questioning the students about what they had learned. It was more about giving the students the opportunity to get questions as well as educators. And I feel as though it has sort of helped improve that was perception, improve grades in those situations anyway. It's one of those things that we could look at in future, potentially how to use the Vevox, then improve exam marks. But we only have to be mindful as well that cohorts are always going to be different. So
it's just about it's so difficult. We've had the same debate around, can we prove that, having recorded lectures can improve?
Yes.
Except there's so many different things that could have an impact. But Christina or Susanna, anything to say around knowledge retention or improvements? It sounds like it just, from what Christina said, obviously it definitely improves the student experience and gives everybody an equal opportunity, which is important. Right, so let's move on to, we've got a lovely comment here, like me, Christina, saying, love the idea of using it for field trips and those important equity questions. Here's an interesting one for everyone. Do we think education technology will look very different in 5 to 10 years' time? Anybody want to go first on that one? I don't think any of us could have imagined how different it's going to look even 5 years ago when COVID first hit, and how different things were going to be. So
I think it will be very different, not in 5 or 10 years, but earlier, maybe 2-3 years, because things are really changing so fast. And with AI, you get a world of technologies that you just don't know. And so I think, I think it was Christina that said, we must get focus in one or two technologies to have some efficiency, not only for teachers but for students. And in this using this AI and other technologies, new technologies that are coming, I think it will be the same. They are going to change very, very fast, but we need to focus in one or two, or else we are going to be just having a a brain burnout of technology.
Definitely. Okay. Now, this webinar is 45 minutes rather than an hour, so we do only have a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to see if we can fit in one or two more questions. So I'll just close that one. We've got one specifically here for Laura. You mentioned using the Q&A functionality. Have you encountered any problems with this?
I think for me, the main problem is just having to multitask at the same time. So you're teaching students, you then have to look at a laptop or another device. So what I tend to do in that sense is I'll designate time. So I'll say to the students, ask questions as you're going along, but I'll only sort of look at those questions after every sort of 15 minutes, because I have found in the past that I'd prefer students asking questions and sitting and not asking them, but at the same time, it can become quite distracting in a lecture if you're saying one thing and then you've got a question and then saying something else and then a question. So it's a case of just, again, being mindful about how and when it's used. And then you've also got situations, when technology in general fails and, the Q&A might not work at one point. So it's just a case of if technology's not working, just let the students know it's not working, and think very quickly about other ways in which you can take questions. But in general, I haven't had any major issues with it, any major sort of technology fails or anything like that. It's been one of the more useful tools, I think, for me, yeah.
Good. I think, like we did today, being clear about when you're going to look at the questions, how you're going to handle them. I think being able to post the message explaining to people what you're going to do can be really useful as well. Right, I'm aware we're on 45 minutes, so I'm sorry we haven't got to all of the questions. We will have a look at them, and if any of the panel members have got anything particular they want to feedback, I'm sure Vevox could circulate that. The one final thing that they have asked me to flag up is that, just go back to the presentation. We've done the questions, but also within the Vevox session that you're all logged into, there should be a survey you can fill in as well. So a great example of how you can use it offline as well, and fill in the survey for how you found today's webinar. Would you like to see more of the same, and any other feedback that you've got? So it just leaves me to say thank you so much to Laura, Christina and Susanna for today's session. It's been really interesting. I've certainly got a couple of things I might follow up with you afterwards about. Thank you to Vevox for organising it and for asking me to chair. And thank you to everybody for coming along. I hope it was useful, and I'm sure all of us would be happy to answer any questions outside of this session as well. So thank you, and have a good rest of the afternoon.